Divine Source, Great Spirit, we're here by your love and your grace. We thank you for this opportunity to hear you, to sense you, and to speak for you. Help us to listen deeply and to be coming here without judgment, to just be guided by your light, to share messages that are truly helpful. We're grateful for healing of minds and heart. And so it is.
Welcome again to Talking Spirit. My name is Jutta and I'm back with my friend Elizabeth.
Greetings, everyone.
And we are also joined today by our friend Colin, who's in Mexico. And we're just bringing again a third party to mix up the energy a little bit for these talks. And so welcome, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Jutta. Thanks, Elizabeth, and hi, everyone.
We've just sort of been sitting in this energy of, well, we've been talking about Percy Jackson a little bit, which is a fantastic movie for awakening, but the scene that has been really speaking loud is one in which the main parties of this story land in a place where they are actively being put to sleep, and they're asked basically by the spirit to wake up from this sleep and really watch what's happening around them and notice that something's off. And I think just in terms of the spiritual path, it's a great scene because we can fall asleep even in the middle of our spiritual path. And I think when we come together for these kind of recordings, there's always a deep prayer to bring wakefulness into any parts of our minds that have fallen asleep. And I think all of us have stories and experiences of when we come across, either in ourselves or in somebody else, parts in the mind that would rather be sleeping than continuously waking up. So I guess it's another talk a little bit about these sort of pitfalls that we can fall into on the spiritual journey. And as always, we're just here to see what the spirit has to say and see what wants to come through. And I think ultimately always bringing it back to the real desire in our hearts, which is to feel the joy of the spirit and share that. So excited to see where it's going to take us today.
Yeah, the movie is really brilliant, and I think Jutta brought it to my attention. And the idea of the mythic journey, it's really one of those sort of hero's tales. And we found out before this recording that Colin doesn't know the movie, but we're still going to use the energy of it and some of the details of it. But this idea of the hero, going on a quest to gain power or to do whatever, it's told in so many different ways. And, we do need storytelling, it seems. We need to hear about other people's journeys and learn through other people's experiences. We talked a little bit about that in the transformation talk we did with another friend. And but we're on the journey for awakening. And yes, it's a mythic journey in a sense, but it's, in my way of looking at it, a little different. But in the movie, there's one person that really gets the wake up, like, oh my gosh, how long have we been stuck in this loop? They go into a casino, they're eating these hallucinogenic flowers, and they don't know how long they're there, thinking they're having a good time, thinking they're having fun. And as you said, this world is really designed to keep us asleep, and it's very seductive. We can go asleep within a seeming loving relationship of, another person on a spiritual path. We can go asleep with, getting busy, working on a project in our house. I do that kind of thing a lot. There are lots of ways that we can choose to check out. And this recording that we're really doing is because the three of us have this deep call in our hearts and in our minds to stay on track. And it's really, really easy to default into the world's way of operating. And the worldly pleasures, can be really extreme, like this example of the movie, or they can be more subtle, and they can happen, within spiritual community. We all have a shared background of having been in spiritual community, and that's a place that can be really dangerous to go to sleep, because you think you're actually walking your path. So, this idea of needing to have people that are committed in their hearts to doing that deep inner transformation, and then continuing, we talked about that as well in the last talk, continuing to stay awake and aware. And the only way I know to do that is to keep talking to spirit and to keep saying, what's going on here in my own mind. And then if I'm not really sure about my connection or my clarity about what spirit's telling me, then going to Yuta or Colin or somebody else and say, hey, this doesn't feel right. And so we really need, it's reflected in that movie, we need somebody that's going to get the message and say, hang on, let's get the heck out of here. This is a death trap, So that's what comes to mind. How about you, Colin?
Yeah, thanks for that. As you were saying, I'm yet to see the movie, but I feel quite inspired to check it out later. And these ideas of I'm sort of getting this image of walking a tightrope, and even I think in the Bible Jesus says something like straight is the way and narrow is the gate or something. And just this idea of like to really stay on track, it does take a vigilance, and it can be quite easy to to get distracted and to fall asleep. And I mean, fortunately, if we have the willingness, then like the symbols are going to be there, and whether that's the symbol and the helpfulness of a mighty companion, or I guess these days there's so many like tools that like even we might find ourselves opening our computer and suddenly a talk will come on, and it will literally be the very thing we need to hear that penetrates the slumber that we've been in. So I feel like it's really helpful to just always stay open, because the ego actually does want us in a way to get comfortable. And sometimes we get comfortable, the sleepiness and the drowsiness will set in, because I think I can relate anyway to the idea of change, taking a step away. It can be it's threatening to the ego. It can bring up fears, and yet it's where the expansion is too, and to step into that, out of the comfort zone and into our often what seems like an unknown, and trusting and having faith. Yeah, there are some thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to like have this background of spiritual community, because it was funny, just before this I was talking with my husband, and he was saying like, yeah, some people they join a spiritual community and they think that just being there is going to wake them up, but you do have to do the work even in there, otherwise you're just asleep in another place, right? And yeah, I think even just looking back at times in community where in certain joinings I could just feel where the mind, seemingly in somebody else that I was talking with, would want to really settle in some kind of grand idea of the great I am, and everything is peaceful, and all the healing's already done because Jesus did it, which is like a teaching of A Course in Miracles. Essentially, all the healing's already done because Jesus went all the way and did it for the whole universe. But I think one of the things we always come back to in these talks too is the actual experience. And that what you touched on, Elizabeth, about the scene in Percy Jackson, is that it seems like they're having such a good time and having all this fun, and like everything is happy and everyone is happy and there's so much happiness, but like it's like the mind hypnotized itself into thinking that it's in a joyful place, when in reality there's a prison. It's stuck in a prison and it thinks itself content and happy. So this is the kind of stuff that can happen too, when you, even in like you said, even in relationships where it seems like you're coming together for awakening, there's always this tightrope of, really, how do I really feel? Am I just operating under some teaching I've read that sounds really good and that's the ultimate truth, of course, or is there something else really happening in my mind that isn't an embodiment of that high teaching? And is there actually something for me to look at and heal and say and address and dig up and clear out? And so that's that tightrope.
I was seeing, I love what you've both said, Colin, with this idea of like the need for uncertainty. It's really a need. It's a requirement, really, in this way to walk your spiritual path. And I was having a story, I think it was Jack Kornfield, a Buddhist, some sort. And I think he said in one of his books, I've read it probably 20 years ago, so I may be quoting the wrong person, but it was like a story about how he had been in his monastery, reaching these heights of, very elevated experience and deep restfulness of the mind and all this kind of stuff. I had taken vows, and he got called for some reason out of the monastery to go see family for something. And he said within like 2 minutes of being, whether it was in the airport or back in the family or something, it all went to the crapper. I mean, he was just toast. So, he got this massive wake-up call of, in a certain little container, you might feel like you're floating, in nirvana, but like, come on out in the world and see how that practice of yours is standing up to the test of the seeming world. So, I love what you both had to say, that, these elements that we can experience in our practices or in our journey and in community or out of community, we can get these really powerful experiences given to us that show us something beyond our worldly thinking and our worldly experience. But then the rub really comes in with, how's it showing up for you day in and day out? And this movie is like, the hero's journey. It's like Siddhartha, you get sent out, or you take yourself out of the confines of, your comfy little life, and you go on this journey to see, how do you respond, as Colin said, to the uncertainty of your journey, of the, potential threats out in the world that are going to show you, your attachments, your worries, your fears, your mind stuff. A very, very powerful, powerful journey.
Mm.
Yeah, and like even coming onto these kind of talks that we do, like when we talked together before we started hitting record, just talking about the discomfort that can come up with the prospect of being recorded. Colin, you were talking a little bit about that, but it's like you have a choice, right? You have this discomfort, and you can do one of two things. You can go towards it, or you can say, oh no, I'm gonna just hang out on my couch and just be comfortable and not go towards something that's probably going to help heal my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I guess my path, it's, you know, mostly been A Course in Miracles, and I love the simplicity of the message around that, of like, you know, because often in this world it does seem like there's complexity. You know, we look and we read stuff, and there's this war, there's this pandemic, there's this view about, you know, vaccinate. There's so many, you know, complex ideas, and yet it's quite simplified in the Course, where it's like he's basically saying, well, there's really just the two voices, you know, the voice of fear, the voice that wants to keep us like small and, you know, weak and trapped and worrying and all this sort of stuff, and the voice, the gentle voice, the unconditionally loving voice of the Spirit, that is as gently and eternally there, reminding us it's okay, come this way, you know, like. And that feels a little bit like this theme too of, yeah, because you know, if we're, you know, mostly identified, or like someone very heavily identified with the fearful voice, it's like, why would I want to have myself recorded? You know, like I have to sort of tune into something else that's going, oh, this feels a good step to, you know, like I want to start to experience these teachings that are saying, you know, in reality, there's nothing to fear. And as you move towards it, it dissolves. It's like, wow, this is cool. Let's try this out.
Yeah, I love that. I love it because, yeah, you know, I say this very often, and Elizabeth will point it out too, that, you know, I'm always talking about my experience, and I love talking with people about actual experience rather than, you know, just talking about teachings and studying the teachings and dissecting the teachings and interpreting the teachings, because it doesn't experientially give me anything, and it doesn't help me, like you said, Elizabeth, like with my day-to-day you know, battles in quotes that I have to fight every day. Those teachings can be a foundation, but I want to experience really what they truly mean and how they're used by the Spirit in my life, really practically speaking. And yeah, I think it's, you know, one of the sort of symbols that came up before this call was this symbol of disruption. And it's like, when the mind is asleep, it does need to be disrupted so that it can actually experience that something isn't right, and something needs to change. Like, yes, I have fallen asleep. Like, I do need to be woken up. And like, yeah, I love that, you know, Colin, you say like it's a gentle sort of voice that does end up waking us up, but it is a disruption nonetheless. And I think a lot of people, and I know myself as well, in the past and probably still now, sometimes I would much rather not be disrupted and you know, stay small and stay comfortable. And you know, I'll be doing some traveling here coming up as well in the new year probably, and it's all a little bit uncertain, even though we sort of have like a plan in mind. And you know, there was a bit of a conversation of are we going to continue doing the recordings while you're traveling? And I said, yeah, you know, in the past I would have said, oh no, you know, I don't know where I'll be, and like it'll be too much, and da 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 da. And now it's like, well, no, we have a commitment for these recordings. I want to keep doing the recordings, and it feels so much, there's a sparkle to that, stepping towards the unknown and the discomfort. I find now there's a much more of a spark than staying asleep and, you know, reading the book and talking about the teachings. So I want to experience that I'm much more capable of whatever it is that the spirit would have me do than you know I thought I was. So yeah, it's all of it gets used, and it's so much more fun that way, and it's real fun. Like, you know, in the lotus eating scenes in Percy Jackson, like it seems like fun and joy, but it isn't. And as the viewer, you can see it, but while you're in it, sometimes you can't. And so it does need that disruptor of some kind of shake up, so that you do realize, like, okay, something needs to change. I need a better way, because I want real joy. I want the experience, the full experience in my whole being of what it means to really be on this path.
Yeah, a couple of times as we've been talking, another movie's come to my mind as well. It's called The Nines. The main character is Ryan Reynolds, and it's a really good movie that I think addresses these themes we've been talking about too. He's got this dear friend, or what seems like his best friend. I think it's played by Melissa McCarthy, I think her name might be. And but like, it's almost like he's like hanging out with her. The more he spends time with her, it's actually numbing him. It's keeping him asleep. And there's this other character who, on the surface doesn't necessarily appear to be his friend at times, but she's kind of the disruptor. She's the one that's almost inserted into his dream to help him awaken. So that movie's also an excellent one that addresses these ideas.
Yeah, I love that, Colin. It's so helpful and appropriate to this conversation. And you said this whole energy and reminder of the gentleness of the spirit. It's always unceasingly calling and saying, come on, come on, come on. And the only time where we don't experience the transformation out of the world's thinking in that way of gentleness is when we're not listening and following the guidance. I just had all these images of different people in my life flash in as you were talking, of missing the message over and over again, or getting the message and saying, no, I'm going to do it my way. Thank you very much, spirit. And eventually the wake-up call is experienced in a way that's very severe, because it's the nature of the forces at work in the world, right, that then are going to have to be addressed. Whereas the spirit, maybe for a month or a year or 5 years or 10 years, has been speaking nonstop, saying, hey, you're heading for a brick wall. I'd like to help you avoid it. Can I help you avoid it? There's a brick wall ahead. And the personality says, thank you, got it. Thank you very much. Don't need your help. But the spirit is always trying to help us avoid the brick wall. And that movie shows some of those brick walls and shows some of the players, as you said, who sometimes can seem harsh. I was called a bazooka yesterday. Sometimes I get used to deliver a bazooka so that somebody might get rattled out of their prison cage. And, we sometimes get used to play that role for spirit, because spirit doesn't want us to waste years and years and years of the struggle and then the attempt to recover from the struggle. When the penny drops finally on the person who's been resisting the spirit, it can be quite costly, and it can take a lot in the world's terms to come back up out of the pit that they've fallen into. And that movie shows many of those versions of possibility if you're not going to wake up. It can feel kind of brutal, the transformation process, if we've been denying, delaying, which is part of, again, what brought us to this call. Is we don't want to do that. We don't want to miss the message, and we don't want to delay what is the inevitable. The inevitable is the awakening. The inevitable is the healing of the one mind. But we could take another many eons to choose it.
Yeah, it sort of brings up this line from A Course in Miracles, like the immediacy of awakening. And yeah, I think, one of the things that Colin and I were talking about recently, and things I've often talked about, is, when I first got into the Course in Miracles, I was reading it and trying to practice it, and I ended up joining some course groups, where people were studying the teachings and trying to make sense of it, because it is a very heady sort of book, kind of dry in terms of, how it's written, and there's just so much of it. Like I said, like 600-700 pages of just teachings in the text, and then even more hundreds of pages in the workbook, and then there's a teacher's manual and a psychotherapy pamphlet, and there's so much in this one book, and you can study yourself to death with that thing. And I think I had luck in the beginning when I joined some course groups, because the facilitator in one of them was he had a presence that you could really trust, and he really wasn't so much into trying to interpret every line of the text, but was bringing it back to experience, and and this whole idea of like getting in touch with the spirit and getting in touch with this guide that sees the full picture for you, and that really wants to tell you, yes, there's a brick wall coming and you don't need to run into it. But there's such a temptation to get stuck in studying and reading and rereading and trying to get the message of whatever. It's not just the Course in Miracles, but really whatever path that you feel called into. There's a huge temptation to just to fall asleep in the studying aspect of it, versus the whole goal of it, which is to get in touch with the spirit, with this guide in your mind that knows what healing is necessary and knows how the healing is facilitated. And I know people that have been seemingly on the path with A Course in Miracles for 20-30 years, and they're still going to course groups, and they're still doing the studying, and they're still doing the workbook. And like, to me, it doesn't speak to me at all. I actually don't know the last time I do know the last time I picked up the Course and read some of it, but it's very I spend very little time actually reading that book now, because there's so much more, there's something so much more fulfilling in just waking up and at some point pray with the spirit to see what it is that I need for this day. What would you have me do today? And what's my focus for today? And sometimes it's not stuff that I want to be doing, because I'd rather be in bed and watch a movie. And sometimes I do then just watch the movie, just because that's just the way I can handle it that day. But and we all experience that, but there is this prayer of wanting to be led and to be moved through the discomfort and go into the uncomfortable places that will expand my mind into places that it hasn't gone to yet. That's what gets me going, so yeah, there's a huge temptation on any spiritual path, or any path whatsoever, to get stuck in learning and studying and talking about stuff, and finding out who has the right interpretation of whatever it is that you're reading. And that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, I think again, one of the other things we talked about before this call was the idea of collaboration, and maybe we'll be doing,
Mm.
you know, a whole talk on that down the road. But you know, the energy of spiritual community has been all throughout this, and you two came together and knew each other because of the spiritual community you've been associated with. And you know, I have my experience with spiritual community, and so you know, it's so vital that we have help, you know, and not everybody's going to be called to it through a spiritual community. But it really is, or was for me, deeply transformative, no question about it. But for me, you know, I came to see for myself, you know, it was yoga, meditation, Vedanta teachings, Advaita Vedanta, and really potent container for transformation. A lot of stuff was shown to me about my mind and about the way I was operating. But for me, there came a point where I was going to be asleep in that arena.
Mm.
And it was just going to be, you know, another persona, potentially another set of teachings that I was going to try to just sort of order my mind around and try to make myself feel comfy within. And, you know, that's for me. That doesn't need to be for anybody else in spiritual community. But for me, it was for sure a red flag. And, you know, it still was a longing, still has been very many times a real longing for that sense of community, that sense of support. And, you know, we've just had to find it in new ways, stepping outside of those containers that we've been in. Or for Colin, you know, he's talked about like coming to do this with us was a real way to choose to expand his mind and his experience. And I'm so grateful for it, you know, because all this grace that Colin has been stewing in within himself with the spirit, it's right here for me to embrace and for me to receive. It's like that's how grace works, you know. And I was just having this whole energy of, in truth, we are light. And you think about a light, you know, a laser being used to cut something, you know, cut through a piece of metal or cut through a body part, you know, it's so powerful. And you know, that call to be receiving that light in our minds it's everything. But we can feel spun out by it, or confused by it, or blown up by it, or overloaded by it. And so again, something about community being important to say for me on some level. I'm trying to communicate something here unskillfully, but you know, there's just it's so important that we have people, seeming symbols of people for the spirit and for that inner guide to use to help us to wake up, stay awake, get the call, whatever it is. And, you know, I guess I'm really just trying to say I'm grateful for the two of you. I'm grateful for all of the other seeming reflections that have rattled me. You know, we were talking before, Colin and I learned of Colin back in 2014, 2015, because he had done interviews with somebody in his community. And I was caring for my father in his home at the end of his life. Incredibly deep healing journey, incredibly painful, difficult journey for me. And there was Colin Carter interviewing Francis Zhu on the computer. And I got to bathe in the reminder of what I was doing there with my dad. You know, I needed a lifeline during that time. And there it was through Colin and Francis. Incredible blessing. So, you know, we get put through the rigors of our journey, as we've said so many times, in a way that is right for us. I had to have that healing with my father to let go of so many old ideas in my mind that were still hanging out there. And it was vital. It was vital, crucial to my greater healing and awakening. And the spirit gave me the container. And then in those moments where I was like ripping my hair out and felt like my skin was on fire in the purification with my father, there was all this grace coming in through people sharing the love like this. So I want to say it again. Thank you, Colin. Thank you for your dedicated heart.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah. One thing that's coming to my mind after listening to both of you share there too is just almost this idea of like the journey. It's, there's often a series of stages where, and maybe for a while it does look as though we have what might seem to be like an external teacher or teachers that are supporting us. And then I feel like, just speaking for myself, I feel like it seems to get to a stage too where it's helpful to let that teaching or teacher go as well, just to let that, maybe it's only temporarily, but just letting it go, so that, because ultimately, I feel like the inspiration and the strength and the peace that's in our mind is going to be when we really get that actually this guidance, I can trust deeply what I'm feeling, this inner knowing, this spirit is within. And I feel like in a way that's kind of what we're all saying too, that that spirit's eternal. It's always going to be there. And, I can trust that it's going to be made obvious. If I'm to be here, if I'm to be there, if I'm to be with this group, if I'm to connect with you guys, like it's just going to be made really obvious. And I can trust that feeling within. It's like I'm going to feel my heart just glowing, and almost like my heart's going, yeah, this is good. Yeah, stay with this, So so I'm grateful to you, Elizabeth, and you, Yuta, for this opportunity. It feels very fresh and alive in my mind.
Yeah, I'm grateful too. This is lovely. And we're hitting our 40-minute mark almost, but I think it's some beautiful closing remarks from you, Colin, just to remember that we have this eternal guide accessible all the time. And if there's a willingness and this sense of openness that we can carry throughout every day on this journey, that really is like the biggest gift we get, that we have this accessible all the time. And it's like we can't really be led astray too far when we have this deep prayer and we have the openness to let that light of the spirit shine on all the dark places in our minds. And I think just coming together for these recordings is just one way of doing that, for us personally, and maybe for whoever might be listening as well. But if you guys have any final remarks, then
just thank you. Thanks for everything. And it's just feels a gift. Feels beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, thank you for talking, thank you for joining us. It's been a gift. Until next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.